3 years into our marriage, my wife consistently refused to have children. Yet, how could I miss the sheer adoration radiating from her whenever she looked at children? Until, by sheer chance, I uncovered a staggering secret. She had, unbelievably, born an illegitimate child abroad. And behind it all, the entire Shen family was complicit, pulling strings in the shadows. They seemed in no rush to bring this to light. Instead, they were silently plotting, scheming to make me disappear from this world entirely. Their calculations were crystal clear. The man intended to use the child to bind my wife firmly to him, and then conspire to seize the vast fortune I had painstakingly built. Looking at the immense figures in my accounts, I knew perfectly well that even a fraction slipping through their fingers would be enough for them to squander lavishly for generations. But this wealth was earned with my blood, sweat, and tears. How could I simply hand it over? No, I would absolutely not allow such a thing to happen. Since they had plotted so meticulously, then let my wife disappear, taking her child with her. As for that man harboring ill intentions, he'd best crawl back to whatever hole he came from like a dog returning to its kennel. My wife, Shen Qingwei, had cheated on me. More shockingly, their illegitimate child was already a year old. Had their actions not been so clandestine, I wouldn't have remained ignorant of this secret until now. Shen Qingwei had used the pretext of traveling abroad to find a surrogate overseas. The entire Shen family was involved, keeping me completely in the dark. My discovery of this entire affair was purely accidental. The man, Zhao Cheng, had returned to the country. My assistant happened upon Shen Qingwei intimately holding a child whose features bore a striking resemblance to hers. My assistant secretly took photos and brought them to me. The moment I saw them, I froze. The resemblance. It was uncanny. I had seen photos of Shen Qingwei as a child. This boy resembled her at least 80%. Combined with the sheer intimacy radiating from her as she held the child, no one would believe he wasn't hers. However, even as fury burned within me, reason prevailed. Having navigated the treacherous waters of the business world for so many years, what dirty tricks hadn't I witnessed? I wouldn't jump to conclusions based on a single photograph. I trust only the results of my own investigation. My assistant was highly professional and exceedingly efficient. In just 1 week, a thick file lay before me. Before I even opened it, my heart had already sunk to the depths. It turned out that the year Shen Qingwei married me, her first love, Zhao Cheng, scorned by the Shen family for his humble background, had left the country in bitterness and indignation. Shen Qingwei and Zhao Cheng had shared deep feelings. Later, unable to contain her longing, she went abroad to meet him. Their old flame rekindled, and they resumed their affair. Afterward, Shen Qingwei had been unfaithful, but fearing discovery, she hadn't dared to bear the child openly. Thus, using IVF and finding a surrogate mother on the overseas black market, they had this little boy. What the Shen family was thinking is beyond me. They ceased their opposition and instead helped Shen Qingwei conceal the secret. The child was admittedly adorable, but thinking of his origins filled me with nothing but disgust. No wonder Shen Qingwei had professed her love for children these past few years, yet always made excuses to avoid having one with me. I had naively believed she simply wasn't ready. I never imagined she had already borne another man's child, a bastard, out there. After confirming Shen Qingwei's infidelity, I carried on as usual, showing no outward sign of anything amiss. After all, quarrels and commotion solve nothing. Since she committed such an act, she must bear the consequences. What I need to consider now is their next move. Reacting defensively isn't my style. Taking the initiative is the path to victory. I will absolutely not allow others to easily seize the vast enterprise I worked so hard to build. We are all adults. Let's dispense with talk of love and affection. It's far too extravagant. Interests are the primary consideration. It is inevitable that betrayers must pay the price. I shut myself in the office alone and lit a cigarette. Memories of the past 3 years flickered through my mind. In truth, this marriage lacked any emotional foundation from the start. It was purely a union of interests. My family had wealth, but lacked market channels. Her family had connections, but lacked funds. I never expected to be schemed against from the very beginning. Through 3 years of ups and downs, I had thought that even if we couldn't be utterly devoted, we could at least treat each other with mutual respect. Yet the reality is, now that the fish has been fattened, they are preparing to drain the pond. How ironic. However, solving this problem won't be easy. Even knowing about Shen Qingwei's affair, I can't force her to leave the marriage with absolutely nothing. Over these years, with my family's significant support, the Shen family's business has grown rapidly. I must reclaim all of that. Just as I was lost in thought, Shen Qingwei called. Honey, are you very busy today? Why aren't you home yet? I looked up. The sky had long turned dark. Unwittingly, I had been contemplating for the entire day. Listening to her voice, gentle as water, over the phone, the corners of my lips curled into an involuntary arc. Yet this smile was utterly mocking. These past few years, Shen Qingwei had hidden her other family very well. After all, that home of hers was far away abroad. We frequently traveled overseas for our respective companies' business, so I never suspected a thing. By the time I returned home, it was already midnight. Shen Qingwei was waiting for me on the sofa, the dining table still laid with food prepared for me. Hearing the door open, she approached me with a face full of tenderness. I have to admit, Shen Qingwei is exceedingly beautiful. Her cool, striking features, her well-maintained figure, enough to captivate any man. Seeing her still flawless facade, I sneered inwardly. What an outstanding actress. Those seemingly warm scenes from the past now appeared utterly fake in my eyes. She helped me take off my suit jacket, her smile exceptionally gentle. Why so late today? You haven't eaten yet, have you? I smiled and gave her a light kiss on the cheek, a habit we had developed over the years. Though my heart was filled with disgust, I had to keep up the act for the sake of the bigger picture. Something came up at the company. I've already eaten, perhaps because I hadn't fully prepared myself mentally. The gesture felt somewhat stiff. This subtle change, unsurprisingly, aroused Shen Qingwei's suspicion. She truly is a meticulous woman. Honey, what's wrong? I shook my head, quickly regaining my composure. Nothing, just a bit tired. After so many years together, Shen Qingwei knows me well, able to discern situations from the faintest clues. I had noticed this before in the collaborations between our two companies. She certainly used this to her advantage quite often. Of course, the same applies to my understanding of her. I knew deep down that the man returning to the country with the child was definitely not a coincidence, nor was it simply to provoke me. They likely felt the time was ripe, planning to make me disappear from their scheme. Divorce isn't the preferred option. Disappearance is the ultimate goal. With our two companies now deeply intertwined, completely separating them is easier said than done. Someone is convinced it's time to harvest the fruits of victory. How utterly naive. I continued to feign exhaustion, yet forced myself to chat with Shen Qingwei, perfectly concealing all the emotions swirling within me. Shen Qingwei probably remained completely unaware that all her secrets were no longer secrets. As usual, she acted as if nothing was wrong. I always believed that husband and wife should be honest with each other. But some people, overly confident in their cleverness, think they can pull the wool over everyone's eyes. In reality, my heart was anything but calm at this moment. I longed to grab her by the neck right then and there, to fiercely demand why she did this, even wishing she would vanish completely from my world immediately. But I couldn't act rashly. After all, the law stipulates that illegitimate children also have inheritance rights. My money, I absolutely will not allow anyone to covet it. They won't get a single cent. What I lack most right now is time. I need to prepare for the perfect moment to catch them all in one fell swoop. Though preliminary arrangements have been made, the timing, the circumstances, and the people involved must all align perfectly. Once a woman cheats, she becomes tainted, utterly soiled, to the point of being repulsive. 3 years. Even if this relationship was merely for cooperation, how could feelings not accumulate over time? Now that those accumulated feelings have been exhausted, it's time to carefully calculate the gains and losses. I have lost far too much in this marriage. Moreover, I don't know exactly how far the preparations have gone, but they are at least poised to act. Having lost the initiative, I can only react hastily. Inwardly, I am far from the calm I project. However, the sharp pain of betrayal has instead ignited an even stronger fighting spirit within me. Shen Qingwei is rotten to the core, and this marriage is riddled with wounds, but I will absolutely not let go of the Shen family's money easily. In the Bai family, there is only widowhood, never divorce. Half a month later, Shen Qingwei stood at my study door, her expression unusual. With a smile, I beckoned her in. Qingwei, is something the matter? Lately, using the excuse of being busy with company affairs, I've been sleeping in the study almost every night. I simply couldn't help it. She is unclean now. Even having her lie beside me, doing nothing, makes me feel as if I'm lying in a pile of refuse, utterly uncomfortable. She has always been suspicious by nature, but I've maintained my facade well enough that she cannot confirm her suspicions. And I naturally have no intention of bringing things into the open. Arguing and fighting are childish behaviors. If I were to reveal everything, wouldn't I be playing right into their hands? Thus, she's as anxious as an ant on a hot pan, yet finds no pretext to question me. I heard the Bai Group and the Shen Corporation are reconciling accounts recently. Is something wrong? Shen Qingwei asked. Suppressing my inner revulsion, I lifted her onto a chair and said, feigning distress, there is indeed a small problem. Our recent collaborations have been going smoothly, but unfortunately, a few accounts don't quite add up. I didn't want this small matter to affect the partnership between our families, so I had people meticulously check the accounts. Where that money went, I knew crystal clear. Ever since discovering Shen Qingwei's affair, I had tightened our cooperation with the Shen family and exercised increasingly strict control over fund expenditures. The Shen family's weakness remains the same as 3 years ago, a lack of money. Now, the Shen family's cash flow is already somewhat strained. Even normal business dealings are becoming difficult. How could there be spare money for her to lavish on that little lover? Those funds, which should have been deposited into the Bai Group's account, were actually misappropriated by Shen Qingwei. That Zhao Cheng and their child had returned not long ago. They demanded the best of everything, naturally incurring significant expenses. Hearing my words, Shen Qingwei visibly stiffened, and the smile on her face became somewhat forced. However, she quickly composed herself and said with a pout, "Oh, darling, honestly, it was me who took that money. Isn't our wedding anniversary coming up soon? I wanted to give you a surprise. The Shen Corporation's cash flow has been tight lately, so I thought I'd borrow it temporarily and pay it back later. I didn't expect you to find out." After speaking, she snuggled against me coquettishly, just like she used to. I smiled but didn't press further. She was likely afraid I'd dwell on the matter, so she quickly went out and returned with a property deed. "Here, it's this villa. I originally intended it as a surprise, but I'll give it to you early now. The surprise is gone, so you'll have to give me an extra special surprise later, okay?" I reached out, ruffled her hair, and replied, "All right, I'll definitely give you a big surprise." After being clingy for a little longer, she swayed her hips and left. Right now, she must be burning with anxiety inside. That villa had already been given to her paramour. Now that things were exposed, she would certainly have to get it back. But then, how she would accommodate those two became quite a thorny issue. Lately, my emotions have become increasingly stable, yet a chill deep within me grows ever stronger. If Shen Qingwei merely intended to divorce me, I wouldn't have much to say. While I wouldn't let her off easily, my methods wouldn't become excessive. However, I ultimately underestimated this woman. My assistant has been digging deeper during this time, and as the investigation progressed, the discoveries became increasingly alarming. For the past 3 years, the Shen family has purchased accident insurance policies annually, totaling up to 100 million yuan each time. After I got married, they conveniently bought one for me as well. Shen Qingwei had mentioned this to me, and I never suspected a thing. It's just that the Shen family only started this habit of buying accident insurance before my marriage. Previously, I merely thought they were exercising foresight, but now it feels like a fishbone stuck in my throat. Utterly unsettling. Still, one has to admire their foresight. It seems I've been far too benevolent towards them, allowing them to forget how much the Bai family has benefited them. They've been plotting for quite some time. They certainly are patient. These days, the relationship between Shen Qingwei and me appears increasingly harmonious on the surface. But that's merely superficial. Behind the scenes, I had my assistant initiate things long ago. Since no one is willing to lay things bare, then I shall be the one to tear through this paper-thin facade. Now, my plans are in place, and I have no desire to continue this game of cat and mouse. A little prodding should be enough to throw them into disarray. After all, some people are fundamentally hopeless cases, like a dude who could never be propped up. Back then, the Shen family looked down on Zhao Cheng. Now they find me too domineering. Ultimately, in their eyes, marriage is merely a tool for acquiring benefits. Since that's the case, I'll grant them their wish. I sat in my office, leisurely sipping the coffee I had ground myself. Lately, Zhao Cheng has grown increasingly agitated. It's clear the Shen family is merely using him, and Shen Qingwei has no intention of getting rid of the father to keep the child. That, apparently, is her final red line. How could Zhao Cheng not be anxious? If the plan doesn't succeed soon, he will inevitably become a pawn discarded by the Shen family. Shen Qingwei has strictly forbidden Zhao Cheng from appearing before me, but no matter. I will, of course, arrange a suitable pretext for his appearance. Soon, everything was arranged. Looking at the man in the photograph, I couldn't help but smile. The young man was indeed handsome, dressed in a sharp, bespoke suit, yet he couldn't hide an air of being a monkey dressed in finery. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe watch worth millions. He exuded the aura of the nouveau riche. In his eyes, there was nothing but foolishness and greed. Seeing this reminded me suddenly of when I first met Shen 3 years ago. Back then, she was a complete novice in the business world, her eyes holding the clarity of naive ignorance. One could say that the methods she employs today were all taught by me, bit by bit. How ironic. Are they planning to stage a teach the apprentice only to have them starve the master scenario? However, this master still has an ace up his sleeve yet to be played. Make the arrangements. Teach this kid a lesson. At this moment, Shen Qingwei was riding high, any previous panic born from the tightened cash flow having long vanished without a trace. Buoyed by Shen Qingwei's favor, Zhao Cheng lived a leisurely and carefree existence. Even Shen Qingwei's parents were exceedingly pleased with Zhao Cheng. And why wouldn't they be? Though Zhao Cheng lacked significant capabilities, he was sufficiently obedient. Unlike me, who, in the eyes of the Shen family, was undoubtedly an inescapable burden. But how could I allow Zhao Cheng to continue living so comfortably? Just as Zhao Cheng was getting tipsy in a bar, a beautiful woman proactively took a seat beside him and cooed, "Handsome, buy me a drink, won't you?" Though alcohol had clouded his judgment, Zhao Cheng still retained a sliver of rationality. He knew perfectly well that he was currently living entirely off Shen Qingwei. What right did he have to be fooling around? Thus, he refused without hesitation. "Sorry, I don't have any money. Miss, perhaps you should ask someone else." However, the woman wasn't deterred. It remains unknown what tactic she employed, but merely a few minutes later, Zhao Cheng willingly began buying her drinks. The two chatted animatedly, their demeanor growing extremely intimate. The beautiful woman, however, seemed unable to hold her liquor well. Just as Zhao Cheng's willpower was completely crushed by alcohol and her allure, she too swayed and collapsed drunk onto the table. Swiftly, Zhao Cheng swept her up in his arms and carried her off to a hotel. At the stroke of midnight, a sharp woman's scream suddenly pierced the silence within a hotel room. Before long, police sirens wailed below the hotel. When I arrived at the police station, I didn't get out of the car. By my estimation, Zhao Cheng had few connections in Jiangsheng. It was highly likely Shen Qingwei would be the one rushing over. Sure enough, I didn't have to wait long. Shen Qingwei hurried into the police station. What greeted her eyes was a woman with tear streaks covering her face. Squatting beside her was none other than a disheveled Zhao Cheng. Before the two could even begin to argue, I walked in with a faint, knowing smile. "Husband, what are you doing here?" Shen Qingwei asked, her voice laced with panic. My face cold, I pointed my finger at Zhao Cheng and questioned her. "Aren't you going to explain what's going on here?" She opened her mouth but was momentarily speechless, not knowing where to begin. After all, no matter how you looked at it, her presence here today was difficult to justify. In the end, she still forced herself to make an excuse. "Husband, Zhao Cheng and I were university classmates. He has no family or friends here, so he can only call me for help. Please don't overthink things." "But, husband, how did you end up here?" I let out a few cold sneers, ignored her question, and walked straight toward a police officer. "Officer," I said, "Ms. Song is an employee of our company. Our company's legal department will certainly seek justice for our employee." Hearing my words, Zhao Cheng, his face full of resentment, abruptly stood up and yelled furiously at me. She was willing. It had nothing to do with me. "On what grounds do you say I violated her will?" "We were drinking at the bar. She seduced me." Before he could finish speaking, he was sternly rebuked by the police officer beside him. Afterwards, the officer quietly explained to me, "President by this Mr. Zhao insists that Ms. Song set him up, and he adamantly claims this lady is engaged in a special profession. However, we've reviewed the surveillance footage. After Ms. Song got drunk at the bar, she was indeed taken to the hotel by this Mr. Zhao. The footage shows that Ms. Song was not lucid at the time and showed signs of unwillingness to go with him. Currently, this matter is still inconclusive." I nodded, waved my hand, and the assistant and company lawyer behind me stepped forward. I looked at the officer with a serious expression and said, "Officer, Ms. Song is the manager of our company's public relations department, with an annual salary in the millions. She is absolutely not the kind of person engaged in a special profession as this gentleman claims. As for the other circumstances, we'll trouble you to investigate. Our company will certainly cooperate fully." With things having developed to this point, Given Shen Qingwei's intelligence, how could she not understand that this was a setup orchestrated by me? But she was helpless, mostly just thrown into a panic. Only after everything was settled did I turn to look at her and ask, "Shall we talk at home? Or would you prefer to cool down first?" Head bowed, she got into the car without a word. From beginning to end, I never once gave Zhao Cheng a proper look. Hadn't anyone ever told him that, in most situations, the limitations of law, morality, and personal capability often only apply to those at the bottom? The higher one's position, the fewer these restrictions become. He was simply pitting an egg against a rock, crashing his flesh and blood body against the juggernaut of capital. Commendable courage. In the car, we fell in his silence, neither of us daring to break the oppressive atmosphere. Back home, I poured myself a glass of alluring red wine. Then, nonchalantly, I settled onto the sofa, gently swirling the glass, sipping the wine with deliberate patience. Shen Qingwei, inevitably, could no longer restrain herself. With that proud disposition of hers, how could she readily admit her own fault? She hesitated a moment, then shuffled reluctantly to my side, her eyes filled with an inexplicable meaning. "What is it? Why are you looking at me like that?" I asked, feigning ignorance, keen to see how this woman would attempt to justify herself. She glared at me for a long while before demanding accusingly, "By hang, how could you become like this, casually slandering people? Don't you trust me? There's really nothing between Zhao Cheng and me. This time, I only went to the police station to bail him out. Think about it carefully. If we were having an improper relationship, would he call me when he got into trouble?" A playful smirk touched my lips. I adjusted my position on the sofa, making myself more comfortable before speaking slowly. "It seems your relationship is quite good indeed. However, aren't there a few things you need to explain to me?" As I spoke, I casually tossed several photographs onto the coffee table. Shen Qingwei picked them up, her expression puzzled. The photos clearly depicted Zhao Cheng holding a child, and other shots of herself holding the same child affectionately. "This must be Zhao Cheng's child, right? Seems quite close to you. Come to think of it, the child even bears some resemblance to you." My words sent Shen Qingwei into an instant panic. Although she knew deep down that what she had done would be discovered sooner or later, she hadn't expected it to be so soon, or revealed in such detail. Even so, she attempted a final, desperate struggle, persisting with her specious arguments. "That child belongs to his ex-wife. Stop being so suspicious all the time. You, of all people, should know perfectly well whether I've ever given birth or not." With that, she stormed out, slamming the door hard behind her. The loud bang echoed jarringly through the empty room. Her reminder triggered a sudden realization. Shen Qingwei and Zhao Cheng had a child together. Why were they so meticulously plotting to have me killed? The answer was self-evident. Naturally, it was for the family fortune I had worked so painstakingly to build. They also feared my unending retaliation should we divorce. Although the child was illegitimate, as long as they concealed the truth effectively, he would still possess certain inheritance rights in the future, capable of inheriting at least a portion of the Shen Group's assets. If I were to truly disappear completely, then all the property would fall into the hands of their little family of 3. I calculated silently in my head, setting aside the Shen Group, just considering our shared marital assets. Even giving her a mere 10% would be enough for their family to live comfortably for several lifetimes. The mere thought filled my heart with bitter indignation. This was the enterprise I had forged through my own skill and relentless effort. No one else could dare to covet even the smallest fraction of it. In the days that followed, Shen Qingwei seemed to vanish from the face of the earth. She didn't contact me proactively, sending only a brief message. "Hubby, something came up at work. I need to go on a business trip. Take care of yourself." Reading this, a wry smile touched my lips, but I didn't expose her lie. I merely tightened security discreetly and arranged for someone to watch her every move around the clock. I knew perfectly well there was no business trip. She was simply spending time with Zhao Cheng. That's right, she had already bailed Zhao Cheng out. Whether conflict would arise between them, I couldn't say. But one thing was certain. They would try every trick in the book to sling all the mud onto me. Even if they guessed I was pulling the strings behind the scenes, I would never admit it. After our last confrontation, Shen Qingwei no longer dared to casually use funds to purchase real estate. However, the ambitious Zhao Cheng didn't seem overly concerned about this. Presumably, in their plans, they were already gleefully calculating how to divide my inheritance. I summoned my assistant. "Has the Shen Group's funding chain been cut off?" I asked. My assistant respectfully handed over a folder. "Rest assured, President Bai I was just about to report to you. Now that the Shen Group's partners have heard you intend to sever ties with them, they're all preparing to terminate their collaborations. I nodded in satisfaction. My assistant had handled this beautifully. Over the years, I had come to know the Shen Group's business channels and partnerships like the back of my hand. I used to think maintaining the status quo was fine, that there was no need to turn the family upside down for a little extra profit. Looking back now, I really had to give myself credit for my foresight. Tell those partners not to rush. They can sign supplementary agreements with the buy group. Let's keep these collaborations firmly in our own hands, I continued instructing. Also, doesn't the Shen family still have considerable assets? Make them put those to use, lest they spend all day coveting things that don't belong to them. My assistant, having been with me for many years, was a master at reading people. Rest assured, President Bai, I will make sure they understand that the true meaning of life is not to covet what isn't yours. His execution was superb. In just half a month, nearly all of the Shen family's business partners had terminated their contracts. Suddenly, the entire Shen household was thrown into chaos. Already strapped for cash, the family's financial situation went from bad to worse. Perhaps too proud to come begging to me, the Shen family began selling off their private assets in an attempt to alleviate the company's financial crisis and plug the funding gap. Alas, the dream was plump, but reality was cruel. Naturally, I wouldn't just stand by and watch the Shen family successfully save themselves. Under the forceful intervention of the buy group, all the Shen family's efforts came to naught. The capital they invested vanished like a stone sinking into the sea, causing barely a ripple, let alone any significant waves. The extremely tight cash flow was like a tightening noose around the Shen Group's neck. Now, with just a slight push from me, the Shen Group would instantly plunge into bankruptcy. But I didn't do it. After all, a starved camel is still bigger than a horse. Even in dire straits, the Shen Group retained some value. Forcing it directly into bankruptcy did not align with the buy group's long-term interests. Faced with the buy group's maneuvers, the entire Shen family descended into chaos, teetering on the precipice of madness. I had long been prepared, having devised contingency plans for potential scenarios. However, the sheer speed with which Shen Qingwei acted still far exceeded my expectations. In truth, from the moment I prepared for the exposé, I had already upgraded my security. I increased my personal bodyguards from 2 to 10. Every time I went out, at least 3 cars were dispatched together to ensure my safety. To achieve her goals, Shen Qingwei would stop at nothing. Events proved my caution was entirely justified. I had asked a friend to procure some testing reagents. Every day before eating, I would discreetly run a test. On this particular day, my meal tested positive for an unidentified drug. Soon after, the cook responsible for preparing the meals was taken away by the police for investigation. The hospital's examination report clearly and unequivocally showed that the drug in the food was an illicit substance. Short-term ingestion would cause mental disorientation and clouded consciousness. Long-term use, however, carried a high probability of inducing a myocardial infarction, endangering life. Mr. By this type of drug is extremely rare in the country, very difficult to obtain. My assistant's face was grim, his expression solemn. As a long-serving member of the Bai household, he was fiercely loyal, nothing like those ungrateful turncoats. I gripped the test report tightly, remaining silent for a long moment before slowly speaking. Make further preparations. Let's hit them even harder. Within a week, the Shen family, desperate to alleviate financial pressure, had sold off nearly all their private assets, lock, stock, and barrel. Even their overseas properties were not spared, all liquidated. However, these efforts were but a drop in the ocean, utterly futile against the Shen family's precarious financial situation. Naturally, I was the one who took over those assets. How could I let others benefit from a sell-off at below-market prices? At this, the Shen family completely lost their composure, unable to sit still any longer. Finally, Shen Qingwei sought me out. Bai Heng, let's have a proper talk. When she frantically rushed back to the villa, her face bore an inscrutable expression. No further probing was necessary. I knew with certainty that the sentiment towards me hidden behind that look was anything but friendly. The moment she switched on the light, she found me casually seated on the sofa, holding a glass of alluring red wine, swirling and sipping it slowly. At the sight of my ambiguous smile, she faltered instantly, managing to force a smile more wretched than weeping onto her face. It took her several seconds to regain her composure. "Oh, husband, it's such a relief you're all right." Concern was plastered across her face, though it rang utterly false. I heard the nanny drug your food. I was worried sick. Hearing her insincere platitudes, a wave of intense nausea washed over me. My expression remained placid as I reminded her, my tone unhurried. The police have already taken a nanny away, I said. I'm surprised you returned from your business trip so quickly. These simple words caused her complexion to shift dramatically. A flicker of malice and cruelty flashed across her features, yet devoid of any remorse. Well, she stammered, unable to concoct a plausible excuse. I had no patience for further nonsense. I slapped a legal complaint down in front of her and stated coldly, Shen Qingwei, I am filing for legal action. Every penny you gave Zhao Changhua, I intend to recover it all. The detailed statements are attached. See for yourself if I am accusing you unfairly. She lowered her head, not daring to meet my gaze. I knew that behind that downcast gaze, her mind was frantically weighing her options. After all, my actions could very well expose her plot to hire a killer. And what likely unnerved her most was my deliberate silence on the matter of the drugged food. By hang, I know I've wronged you regarding this, she began. Let's do this, we get a divorce. She paused, then added, I won't take a single cent of the marital assets. Our families, the Bays and the Shuns, notarized our prenuptial assets. You wouldn't object to that, would you? My only request is that you leave the Shun family out of this. After all, we were married for 3 years. Let's part on good terms, amicably. You won't be losing out with this division of assets. I let out a cold laugh, my voice laced with finality, leaving no room for negotiation. Shen Qingwei, from the moment you betrayed me, forgiveness became impossible. As for sorry, I have no interest in hearing it. Divorce? Don't even think about it. I won't let that despicable person get their way. As for this whole affair, my voice dropped cold and hard, I intend to repay it measure for measure. Shen Qingwei must have been inwardly seething with frustration. If her plan had succeeded today, none of this trouble would have occurred. She opened her mouth as if to say more, but I had grown weary of her prevarications. Without further ceremony or mercy, I threw her out. In the days that followed, Shen Qingwei never returned home, which suited me just fine. The thought of sleeping beside such a venomous woman made me keep one eye open warily through the night. It wasn't until a month later that Shen Qingwei finally began to yield. She had run out of options. I hadn't left the house at all during this time, rendering her usual tactics useless. Furthermore, the Shen group was on the brink of collapse. Without a fresh injection of capital, bankruptcy and liquidation were imminent, at most half a month away. With our wedding anniversary approaching, she found herself an excuse to back down. Perhaps she naively believed I would, like before, at least maintain a semblance of peace on the surface, and then slowly resolve the issues. But she was gravely mistaken. This time, I had no intention of solving the problem. Wouldn't it be better to eliminate the person causing the problem directly? Hubby, we were too impulsive last time. Let's have a proper talk, she said. Looking at the woman before me, I nodded, not refusing. Talk about what? How you cheated, or about your illegitimate child. My words were like a sharp blade, excessively pointed. This nearly caused Shen Qingwei to lose control of her emotions. She softened her tone, forcing her expression into what she likely thought was a moving plea. Hubby, I really didn't cheat. I'll be honest, Zhao Cheng is indeed my ex-boyfriend, but we ended things long ago. As for the child, he is biologically mine, but I didn't give birth to him. I don't know what methods he used to steal my eggs. With a ghost of a smile, I watched this woman spouting utter nonsense with such a straight face. I took a light sip of coffee and spoke slowly. Oh, that sounds like a legal activity. Perhaps we should call the police. Her face instantly turned ghastly, yet she had to force a helpless expression as she explained, Hubby, it's not that I don't want to call the police, but Zhao Cheng is a foreign national now, and all this happened abroad. The police here have no jurisdiction. Gazing at her face, once familiar but now utterly strange, a visage I once found beautiful now only filled me with revulsion. Wanting to erect a monument to her virtue while peddling her wares. Utterly disgusting. So, how do you plan to resolve this? Hearing my question, Shen Qingwei mistakenly thought I was finally compromising and hurriedly said, Hubby, here's the plan. I'll bring the child back. He's only 1 year old, after all, and my own flesh and blood. Later, we can have another child, one that belongs to just the two of us. As for Zhao Cheng, I'll give him some of money to disappear from our lives forever, okay? I chuckled inwardly. The audacity of this woman. She hadn't learned much else, but she had Wu Zetian's methods down pat. Once our child was born, It might just meet with an accident someday. Then, only her illegitimate son would remain. Her calculations were certainly clicking loudly. It doesn't have to be that troublesome. The child can be adopted. We'll get notarized. Since he's illegitimate, he'll have no inheritance rights. Even if he ends up being the only child left, my assets will be donated directly. As for Zhao Cheng, paying him off is such a hassle. Do you need my help dealing with him? I guarantee it will be a permanent solution. The moment my words landed, Shen Qingwei's face turned deathly pale. The gentle expression she had feigned completely crumbled, replaced by a ferocious, terrifying mask. Bai Heng, how can you be so vicious? She spat fiercely. I let out a cold laugh, the earlier playful glint in my eyes replaced by sheer ruthlessness. Me vicious? What about you? You're far filthier, far more disgusting. Don't think I can't see through your petty schemes. You're still far too green. Shen Qingwei's face turned livid. She had assumed that by humbling herself and coming to me, I would make concessions. Finally, she spat out, "You don't know what's good for you," and slammed the door as she stormed out. After long deliberation, I called my assistant, my tone calm, yet resolute. "Proceed. Make sure it's clean and swift." Over these years, I had secretly taken control of the Shen Group's business channels. Ostensibly, the Bai and Shen Groups were bound by mutual interests, a community sharing glory and ruin alike. But in reality, the Bai Group's strength had long surpassed Shen's, completely overwhelming them. This move of mine was intended to throw them into disarray. The reason I couldn't let the Shen Group go bankrupt was not due to any lingering affection for Shen Qingwei. Our two families held cross-shareholdings. If Shen Group were to collapse, Bai Group would inevitably suffer heavy losses, and I've never been one to act against my financial interests. Sure enough, it wasn't long before police officers arrived at my door, summoning me to the station. One officer spoke gravely. "Mr. Bai, your wife was in a car accident today. Someone has reported you for premeditated murder. Please explain." I shrugged, responding with disdain plain on my face. "Officer, my wife was having an affair and hasn't been home for at least a month. You probably shouldn't be asking me for the specifics. However, she is still my wife, after all. May I know the details?" The officers exchanged glances before recounting the circumstances of the accident scene. This morning, Shen Qingwei, along with her parents, her child, and, of course, Zhao Cheng, were together. The whole family, quite a procession, was reportedly planning to travel out of town. Likely fearing I might take action, they intended to get far away. However, while traveling on a mountain road near the reservoir, the road was slippery, and coupled with a brake line failure, the car lost control and slid into the reservoir. By the time rescuers arrived, they only managed to save Zhao Cheng, who was barely breathing. Everyone else tragically perished and now lay neatly in the morgue. Zhao Cheng's first act upon regaining consciousness was to accuse me of murder. "Are you familiar with this car?" an officer asked, handing me a photograph. I glanced at it and shook my head decisively. Never seen it before. That car was bought for Zhao Cheng by Shen Qingwei. Naturally, I had to flatly deny knowing it. The officer stared intently at me for a long moment before speaking slowly. "This car's brakes failed, causing it to lose control." As he spoke, he kept a close watch on my expression. I shrugged nonchalantly. "Officer, I'm unaware of the situation you described. If you need to investigate, please proceed. I really don't know how to confess to something I didn't do." With that said, I stood up, ready to leave. But soon, an officer with sharp eyes and a stern expression stopped me. "Just a few more minutes of your time. There's one more question. Why did you purchase substantial accidental death insurance policies for your wife's family?" In an instant, the atmosphere in the room became tense, like swords drawn and bows bent. I smiled faintly, signaling them not to be nervous. "I didn't buy this insurance. My wife did. Her family had a habit of buying insurance long before we married, and after the wedding, they bought a policy for me too. As for the reason, I'm not clear on that. Every word I spoke was true. I'm not unscrupulous and despicable like the Shen family. In the end, due to insufficient evidence, the police had no choice but to let me leave. A month vanished in the blink of an eye. In that brief span, the Bai Group completely swallowed the Shen Group. Simultaneously, the insurance payout, a staggering $300 million, was successfully deposited into my account. This immense sum served as the Shen family's reparation to me, offered in repentance. At the docks, Zhao Cheng and I met for the last time. His face was contorted with rage, eyes bloodshot as he glared fiercely at me, demanding loudly, "Bai Heng, you tampered with the car's brakes, didn't you? You murderer!" His shouts echoed across the empty docks, gratingly harsh. I frowned impatiently. The bodyguard beside me instantly understood and, without hesitation, delivered 2 resounding slaps squarely across Zhao Cheng's face. The violent act was swift and decisive, instantly knocking out several of Zhao Cheng's teeth. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth as he groaned in pain. For someone like him, however, this was merely just deserts. I watched him coldly, my tone level, yet imbued with an undeniable authority. Zhao Cheng, some things are best left understood in your heart. Don't expect any definite answers. Pausing, a mocking smile touched my lips as I continued. Oh, right, I have some good news for you. All of Shen Qingwei's assets now belong to me. Aren't you eager to congratulate me? What a pity, though. After today, we'll never have the chance to meet again. Hearing my words, the color instantly drained from Zhao Cheng's face, fear engulfing him like a tidal wave. He dropped to his knees with a thud, kowtowing repeatedly, his forehead striking the rough ground, leaving red marks, babbling incoherent pleas. Boss Bai, Shen Qingwei did it all. It had nothing to do with me. Please let me go, I beg you. I turned a deaf ear to his pleas, as if listening to a dog bark, and spat out coldly. Zhao Cheng, it's time to hit the road. That vast expanse of Southeast Asia awaits your adventures. Zhao Cheng began to struggle desperately, his body twisting, his face filled with terror. I won't go. Boss Bai, please just let me off this once. I promise I'll never appear before you again. I beg you. Having no interest in witnessing his pathetic display any further, I stood and walked away without looking back, tossing cold words over my shoulder as I went. Go peacefully. The dog farm over at the compound is short-handed right now. A place like that is just right for your kind.